Hello all, welcome to the lecture. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss some important topics for UGC NET 2022 political science paper. So we'll go through all of the syllabus. We are going to see that which topics are really very important for 2022. Talking about the first unit, that is political theory. If you look at this topic, political theory, now in it you have to study two things. Firstly, you have to study the ideologies such as liberty, equality, justice, rights, democracy, power, and citizenship. The other part is that you have to cover the isms like liberalism, conservatism, socialism, Marxism, feminism, ecologism, and multiculturalism. When covering this topic, it's very important that you go through the theories in detail, right? So one thing that you have to remember is the scholars. If there is any scholar that is associated with the theories, plus any book that is written by that particular scholar, with that criticism and counter arguments is very important. So when you're studying any theory, it's very important that you cover the criticism as well as any counter argument that has been provided. If I go back to UGC NET 2021, you will see that a lot of questions have come up from the topic of ecologism. So ecologism, straightforward questions were also there, and a lot of emphasis has been laid down over the years on this particular topic. So ecologism is very important. So please cover ecologism properly. There was a direct question asked on Vandana Shiva. So you have to cover this topic in detail. Apart from that, liberalism, Marxism, feminism, more focus you can put on feminism topic, multiculturalism. These are some topic, right? You will find a lot of questions from these topic. Then liberty, equality, justice, rights, democracy, power, and citizenship. Talking about unit 2, political thought. Now in Western political thinkers, when you cover this Western political thinkers topic, when you start with unit 1 itself, you start learning more about these scholars, right? So at that time only, you can note it down some important things and important points. So you can see an overlap is there. Over here also in the political thought, you have to do the scholars. All these scholars are very important, and over here you have to lay emphasis on Plato and Aristotle also. Plato and Aristotle are two topics. Every year you will find questions on Plato, you will find questions on Aristotle. And now you will see that over the past few years, a lot of focus has been on women scholars. So when you are covering the topic of Western political thoughts, please cover the topic of women scholars properly. In UGC NET 2021, a lot of focus was laid on women writers. So you have to cover them in detail, right? The Plato and Aristotle, definitely they are very important. Rousseau is important, and Mary Wollstonecraft and Hannah Arendt, you can cover them in detail. So when you know the trend, when you study the trend, so we get to know that yes, these are particular topics, and for sure some of the questions here and there we can find. Indian political thought is also very important. Here also, like similarly, we had an approach in the earlier unit. Here also, scholars, if there is any theory that is propounded by that particular scholar, as well as the book written. If you are studying about, suppose a Pandita Ramabai, 2021, there was not a question from Pandita Ramabai, but previously there were questions asked on Pandita Ramabai also. And in 2020, a question on Ramabai was there. Gandhi is very one important topic over here. So Gandhi you have to cover in detail. And when you are covering Gandhi, it's not that you just have to study his political thoughts, but contribution of Gandhi in the Indian national movement is this one topic, right? Where you're going to cover up the movements in detail. Chronology based questions can be seen in UGC NET paper. So chronology is very important. Whether it was civil disobedience movement, any pact that was signed by Gandhi, or anything, everything has to be covered. Kautilya, Dharamshastra, very important, right? So Mahatma Gandhi is also one topic that do in detail with Ambedkar. Ambedkar is also an important topic. You can have a lot of questions, as well as Aurobindo. Aurobindo also, any major works or of Aurobindo, any writings and vision and aims. So lot in Indian political thought, it's a huge topic, but some topics are for sure important. If I talk about Kautilya and Arthashastra, Pandita Ramabai, Tilak's idea, then Tagore's idea, Mahatma Gandhi, then the question on Aurobindo and Ambedkar, very, very important. In comparative political analysis, Unit 4, you have to cover the approaches. Approaches like institutional, political culture, political economy, and new institutionalism, and comparative methods. And a lot of questions you will find also. So please do the books as well as the authors who have written it on the topic of colonialism and decolonization, like forms of colonialism, anti-colonial struggles if there were any. Years are important over here. Debates is important in state theory. Then political regimes. In political regimes, we study about democratic and non-democratic regimes. What comes in democratic regimes? Electoral, liberal, majoritarian, participatory, that you have to cover. So you will find a lot of questions on democratic and non-democratic regime. Now, what approach can you follow over here? That when you are studying this topic, comparative political analysis, you have to study the history. In that history, how that thing happened, when did that thing happen, and what was the issue, right? Everything you can cover in detail. Topics, constitutions and constitutionalism. A lot of questions were asked in 2021 also. So you can cover this topic in detail. Constitution and constitutionalism. Forms of constitution, rule of law, judicial independence, emergency powers, and the crisis of constitutionalism is an important topic. Even elite theory of power, it is a very, very important topic over here. Development. When you talk about development, world system theory is important to cover. You can cover this topic in detail. Then about development and democracy. In structure of power, power elites, ruling class, that is important. Actor and processes when you are covering in. So over here, what is important is electoral system, political parties, right? So comprehensively, you can cover this topic in detail. Any kind of new social movement, if it is there, and social movements, you will precisely talk about it. Unit 5 is a very important topic, that is international relations. Lot of questions come from this section. When covering the approaches to the study of international relations. So we have to study a whole lot of approaches like idealism, realism. But precisely if I talk about some particular topics that are really very, very important, one is your realism for sure. Neoliberalism, neo-realism, feminism is one topic, and postmodernism. You cannot leave the other topics, right? So you have to cover idealism also, structural Marxism also, but emphasis can be laid more on realism, neoliberalism, neo-realism, feminism, and postmodernism. Very important, and a lot of questions from these topics have been asked in 2021 UGC NET exam also. When you're doing the topic of international relations, it's very important that you also cover wars and treaties if they were signed. So this has been seen that this trend of asking the questions of war and treaties, it was very much till 2017. Then after that you will not find much questions, but 2021 again questions on war or treaties have come up. So you need to do that. If there is any treaty, it was a news for celebrating anything, any anniversary, any kind of thing, right? So you have to associate this topic with the current affairs. Without this associating it with the current affairs part, the topic would be incomplete. So very important that you cover it with the current affairs also. State system, non-state actors, security, you can cover that. On questions on conflict and peace, right? Changing nature of warfare, weapons of mass destruction, deterrence. And over the year, if I look at the current situations in the international regime, a lot of things have happened over the past year, right? So if I talk about any kind of war, Russia-Ukraine war, anything that you find that's related to the current affair part and that needs to be remembered, that you can cover up. UNs is becoming one another topic that is really, really very important over here. Lot of questions. If you look at the past year paper, a lot of questions have come from this section, UN section, right? Aim, objective, structure, workings of UN. Now that is something very important. UNs, when you're covering, right, you will look for aims, objectives, but you have to go in detail. development perspectives, humanitarian intervention if it has happened in past. There's a whole lot of things that you need to cover in the UN also. Then globalization, also you can cover WTO, Bretton Woods system, G20, anything recently that has happened in these organizations that you need to know. In regional organization, it is very important that you cover SCO, European Union, African Union, ASEAN in detail. Was there anything that is currently in news related to ASEAN that you need to cover up? So definitely when you're covering IR, this particular topic, it's not just about the history, aims and objectives of these organizations, but in the contemporary times, current times, if something has happened, that you need to jot it down. Then you have to study in detail about human rights also. Migration and refugee is another very important topic over here, right? So if there is any important issue related to refugees and migration, because we are seeing it, that you have to cover up. Culture and identity politics. So history is very important. Any development that has happened, that is very important. With that, always cover the criticism part also. If there has been any criticism, that criticism you need to look for. Unit 6, India's foreign policy. If you go and look this India's foreign policy, again this topic is like IR, that would be incomplete without covering the current affairs. So current affairs is really very important here, and you have to cover current affairs properly. Now, if you look at the India's foreign policy, and if I want to study it, how will I study it? I'll study it by chronology wise, right? Pre-independence, during the time of independence, and post-independence, right wise. So you have to study perspective on India's foreign policy, then continuity and change in India's foreign policy, what kind of things that we have observed. So you are studying historical background over here. One thing, NAM is for one topic that you cannot miss. Now, if India has become member of any organization, that you need to know. NAM definitely is a very, very important topic, like Look East policy, Act East, Gujarat Doctrine. Gujarat Doctrine question has come up in 2021 UGC NET exam from Gujarat Doctrine also. Connect Central Asia policy, recent agreements. If there has been any agreement that is signed recently by the Prime Minister, by the government, anything, that is something really very important to cover over here. Talking about India's relation with major powers, when you're covering this topic, you have to note down the recent agreements, if there are any. With USA, have we signed anything that you should know? USSR or Russia? People's Republic of China. So what are there any major powers? We were having a lot of issues with China recently, right? So you can note down where the issue was, it was related to what. So definitely current affairs is really very important over here. Then India's engagement with the multipolar world. So BRICS, ASEAN, SCO, African Union, Gulf Cooperation Council, all these topics, when you're covering it, it is important, not just history, but in the contemporary times, if there is something that is relevant, you need to note it down. Then India's relations with the neighborhood. So SAR, Gujarat Doctrine, definitely very, very important. Now, India's negotiation strategies in international relations, when you're covering a WTO, is definitely, you can definitely not miss IMF. These are some particular topics where yes, questions can come from these topics. Then IPCC, Environment Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Since a lot of things are going on climate, so if there is anything related to that, you can cover up. Questions on maritime security, energy security, right, that you can cover up. Definitely migrants and refugees is one topic that you need to do. Now, if you're covering the topic like climate change, what you can do now, if you look at the budget, there was something like they mentioned about green sovereign bonds. Now it is a current affair topic, green sovereign bonds. What is the use of this green sovereign bonds? So that is how we can make out and bring out some details from the topic. Political institution in India, again a very important topic, and if you look at the last year paper, around 15 to 20 questions were asked from this topic, right? So making of Indian constitution history is really very important. You have to study the history of Indian constitution, constituent assembly composition, constitutional debates. Again, I will emphasize here, constitutional debates is an important topic. Philosophy of the question. Now, philosophy of the question, preamble is for sure one topic that you cannot miss. Questions from fundamental rights can be there, directive principles. So preamble definitely very, very important. Constitutionalism in India, over here, overall the topic is important, but constitutional amendments, this is something that you need to do in detail. So you need to remember here a lot of important constitutional amendments that have happened in the past. Even the basic structure debate. Now, if I look at the basic structure debate, this basic structure doctrine, everything related to this doctrine, history, anything in detail, any kind of changes that have happened, the issues and debates that have come up in the recent times, that needs to be done. Now, if I look at this topic of union executive, union parliament, that you need to cover up. Judiciary, Supreme Court, High Court, judicial review, judicial activism, and judicial reform. Very important that when you're covering this topic, you do detailed analysis of the topic of basic structure doctrine and parliament. Lot of questions have come up from these topic, as well as federalism, also the concept of federalism and union parliament, very, very important. Questions on committees, parliamentary committees, ad hoc committees, any kind of other committees there, everything you need to do. Then you have executive and legislature in the state, then electoral process, election commission of India. When you're covering the topic of constitution and statutory bodies, definitely a lot of things are there to cover. Now, NHRC is there, National Commission for Women is there, National Commission for Minorities is there. When you are doing these topics, you have to do them in details, and they are important. Members, tenure, these kind of things are important. The role of CAG, right? CAG is another important body. This is something. So constitutional and statutory bodies is a very, very important topic. All of these constitutional and statutory bodies are important from exam point of view. Talking about political process in India, it covers new economic policy. So you have to do this. Yes, you have to associate this topic with the contemporary times, with the current times, and do this topic in detail. Then identity politics. When you are doing identity politics, you will study about religion, tribe, caste, region, and language. Social movements. Social movements is also very, very important. So questions on movements can be there. Tribal, women, farmer, labor, Dalit, right? Focus can be laid more on the women social movements if they have been any. Then reorganization of Indian states and demand for new states. Ideology and social basis of political parties, that is national parties and state parties. In Unit 9, Public Administration, this is another very, very important topic. Now you cannot miss this topic. Public administration, meaning and evolution, lot of things are there in this topic. Public administration theories and concepts, scientific management theory, really very important. That you need to do. Bureaucratic theory, human relations theory. So public administration, if I look it as a whole of a unit, whole of the unit is very, very important for the exam. Now, organizational communication. Questions were asked on Chester Barnard previously. So Chester Barnard, and another important and a significant topic over here. So when you know that some topics are for sure, you should not miss these topics. Managing conflict in the organization, Mary Parker Follett. This is also another very, very important topic. Peter Drucker's management by objectives, not so important, but yes, needs to be covered. Then new public administration, Minnowbrook conferences, that you need to do. Unit 10, governance and public policy in India. If you look at this unit itself, very important section now, because if you look at the past year paper trends, a lot of questions have been asked from this unit also. Focus has been on good governance. For that, if there is any scheme, policy, program, you have to cover that in detail. Then one question was asked, the idea of World Bank on good governance. Previously that was asked. So from that perspective, if I look, yes, this topic also you have to associate it with current affairs. Then only you can complete it. So public policy meaning, significance, stages, and RTI, citizen charter, grievance redressal system, Lokpal, Lokayukta. So any bill has been passed or rejected, everything you need to do in detail. Accountability and control. Since I just told you that, this topic, if you're doing it, you have to look at from good governance perspective, judicial review, judicial activism, ARC reports, very, very important over here. You cannot miss the ARC reports, as well as parliamentary committees, anti-corruption commissions, e-governance, Niti Aayog. Now, when you're studying the topic of public policies with special reference to housing, health, and drinking water, that means over here, is there any public policy that have been rolled out recently in a particular state or overall wise? If you look, food security. Now, food security is one topic that is important over here, because a debate was going on that previously we were exporting a lot of things, then suddenly we stopped exporting the food grains due to some issues. Now, if you look at that, something has been in trend, something has been in news for over a time period, so you need to cover that in detail also. Manrega has been in news, so NHRM, RTE, and very, very important that, when you're covering this topic of public policies, definitely previously if some public policies they were rolled out, you have to keep it in mind, as well as in the current times if something is important has been done, that you need to be sure. Thank you. With this we end the lecture here.